All right, so this is section 6.3, part 3. So now we're going to talk about which trig functions are even versus odd. We've had even and odd functions before. Let me just quickly remind you that f a function is even if f of negative theta is equal to f of theta. Now, before we had f of negative x equals f of x, but this one we're talking about is a theta. It is odd if f of negative theta is equal to negative f of theta. So, what types of functions are the sine and cosine functions? One is even, one is odd. So it says use the unit circle below to help you determine which one is which. Well, look, if I find the sine, let's check sine first, of 30, and the sine of negative 30. Let's see what I get. The sine of 30 is positive 1/2. What is the sine of negative 30? Well, in the second quadrant, isn't the sine negative? Because remember, sine is positive only in these two quadrants. So it's negative 1/2. These are not the same. This follows that up there. The sine of negative theta is equal to the negative sine of theta. So you need to know that the sine function is odd. When we graph it, you'll be able to see that it's odd because it'll be symmetric with respect to the origin. Cosine functions are even because if I do basically the same thing, if I find the cosine of 30 degrees and the cosine of negative 30 degrees, well, the cosine of 30 degrees is root 3 over 2. It's positive in the first quadrant. Oh, remember, cosine is also positive in the fourth quadrant. So you would also get root 3 over 2. So you can see that it follows this one up here. The cosine of negative 30 degrees is exactly the same thing as the cosine of 30 degrees. So sine odd, cosine even. The reciprocal functions will be the same thing. So in general, the sine of negative theta is negative sine of theta because it is odd. Cosecant of negative theta is the negative cosecant of theta, again, because it's odd. Cosine of negative theta is the same thing as cosine of theta. It is even. Secant of negative theta is the same as the secant of theta. It is even. Tangent is also odd. So the tangent of negative theta is the negative tangent of theta, which means cotangent is also odd. So the cotangent of negative theta is the negative cotangent of theta. So cosine and its reciprocal are the only even trig functions. Everything else is odd. So, for example, if I want the cosine of 60, the cosine of negative 60, according to the rule, it means it's the same thing as the cosine of 60, and the cosine of 60 on your unit circle is 1/2. Now this one, I'm going to add 360 because that number's so big. So this would be the sine of negative 30 degrees, which according to the fact that it's odd means that is the negative sine of 30 degrees, which is negative 1/2. I'm going to do the same thing here, but I can really use periods here. So let's see, 4 pi, 16's too big. Let's go ahead and let's add, let's see, 32 pi over 4, which means I'm adding 8 pi, which, because it's a multiple of 2 pi, means I'm just going around 4 times. So if I do that, I'm going to get the tangent of, if I add these, I'm going to get negative 5 pi over 4, which puts me on my unit circle, which is the negative tangent of 5 pi over 4, because it's odd, which is negative, and the tangent of 5 pi over 4 is going to be 1. So it's negative 1. And there's the end of the notes for, what is that, 6.3.